Today's top picks from Reuters Breakingviews. Europe and the world may be down, but they're not yet out. And BHP Billiton's street cred is tarnished after the write-down in US shale. With me now to discuss these stories is Reuters Breakingviews assistant editor Peter Larsen. Peter, let's start with Draghi yesterday. Given the intransigence of the Bundesbank, Draghi got it pretty much spot on.
Well, I think the only real flaw, I agree with you, I think the only real problem actually was that expectations had been allowed to build up to such an extent beforehand that what he actually announced was seen as a disappointment. I think if you'd actually not had the speech, the famous Bumblebee speech where he talks about doing whatever it takes, then actually the reaction to what he announced yesterday would have been quite positive.
The expectations, of course, were raised by none other than he himself.
Yes, well, I think, this is the challenge of central bank communication. But when you look at what's actually been proposed, basically the ECB is talking about buying short-dated bonds, but as part of some kind of program which would presumably involve sort of the bailout funds, at least partially funding some of the longer-dated issuance for some of these countries. He's talking about dealing with the question of the ECB ranking senior to other creditors. He's also left open the door for further LTROs. Actually, when you put it all together, it's not fantastic, but it's definitely not a disaster. And so we think maybe the markets are overreacting a little bit.
And I think, as you can see from the charts up there, the reactions in the markets today, as opposed to yesterday afternoon, is more positive. 2-year yields in Spain and Italy falling very sharply. Yeah,
I think people are sort of beginning to look through sort of the kind of the immediate headlines and seeing some good stuff. I mean, clearly the Eurozone is, it's not out of the woods, it's muddling through, etc., etc. But I think the idea that somehow this was kind of, that we're now on a path to the whole thing breaking up, I think is probably mistaken.
September, though, is shaping up to be a potentially huge month. We've got the German Constitutional Court vote on the ESM. Moody's might cut Spain to junk, and the Troika's review of Greece. So, as you say, a lot of hurdles still to come.
Well, a lot of hurdles, and also, I mean, it's pretty clear from yesterday's announcements that Spain and Italy, if they want to get their funding costs down, are going to have to apply for some kind of formal bailout. And there's still a lot of work to be done about how that's going to look, and whether that whole process, with them applying for a bailout, getting help with funding for longer dated debt, the ECB buying shorter dated debt, whether that will actually be enough to sort of create some sort of virtuous circle of restoring confidence.
A few ifs and buts there still, of course. Let's move on to BHP Billiton. A huge write-down on a purchase it made only last year. I thought these guys were meant to be the smartest on the commodity block.
Well, I think that's what they thought as well. And so, I think this is a blot on their copybook at the very least. I mean, I think, the sort of the benign interpretation is that, everybody piled in and bought shale gas assets in the US. The shale gas prices plummeted. A lot of these assets are now losing money. BHP is not alone in this. Everybody else has this problem. BP wrote down some shale gas assets earlier this week. And it's a non-cash accounting charge, and therefore, it doesn't really change the fundamentals, and it might still come good. But for them to make such a big bet on shale gas is and for it to go wrong is it dents their credibility, because they have a reputation for being good at identifying future prospects, and this calls that into question.
It was a $4.75 billion purchase last year, and the hit was what, $2.8 billion?
$2.8 billion, yeah.
So more than 50%.
Yeah, I mean, it's accounting charge, but I mean, the CEO has waived his bonus, which tells you that kind of he takes it seriously, and I think they'll have to be a little bit more humble in future.
So how does management get back on track then?
Well, I think a bit of humility is probably a good idea, and also maybe just sort of dialing down the big acquisitions. I mean, they went after the potash deal in Canada, which they couldn't get that done either. And this has been the problem for BHP, really, is kind of have they got to a point where they're too big to actually kind of make meaningful acquisitions in new areas, and to identify them, and to actually and to kind of make them work. And I think so. I think a bit of humility will help, but there is this sort of existential question, which is that kind of acquisitive portfolio manager approach to commodities may have run out of road. Yeah.
Okay, Peter, thanks very much, and have a great weekend. Thank you. That's all for now. My thanks there to Peter Larsen. For more agenda-setting financial insight, do watch our US Breakingviews show every day at 12:30 Eastern. Of course, that's 17:30 BST. I'm Jamie McGeever. This is Reuters.